Barron Trump then quickly disproved everyone. The convention center was crowded. However, it was impossible to describe the intensity in the room. It wasn't the typical thrill that accompanied a well-known speech. It was something different. It wasn't tense either. A silent, lingering doubt. People had arrived for a variety of reasons. Some people came here genuinely curious, questioning whether this was the time. At last, Barron Trump would enter the political sphere. Others came because they anticipated a catastrophe, a train accident. For the following week, they may analyze on cable news. Afterward, there were others who were just waiting to determine whether he had anything at all worth saying. The cameras had already begun to roll. Reporters sat with poise, hovering fingertips over their keyboards. All of the main news networks were airing live. Their whispering anchors fast-paced commentary over the stage footage. Barron Trump has never before made a public statement, not in a formal position. Whether he is reading from a prepared statement is unknown to us, or if this is a private matter. The actual query is, will he make an effort to keep his father at bay? Alternatively, will this be more of the same? Like static in the air, conjecture permeated the space. However, Barron Trump was not paying attention behind the scenes. His fingers remained motionless, laying lightly on the podium's glossy wood. He heard muffled waves of the audience's buzz. However, his thoughts were elsewhere. It wasn't about proving himself at this time. It wasn't about winning over detractors or altering their beliefs. It was about being heard at last. People had been talking about him for years. For him, all around him, they had fashioned him in their own image. A political heir and a pampered wealthy child. A pawn and a mystery. But for the first time today, his voice would be heard by them. Through the speakers, a deep voice cracked. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Barron Trump." When the whispers ceased, the tension suddenly became clear. The curtain flew open, and Barron Trump entered the platform. A flurry of camera flashes swept the room. Every politician and journalist, every person waiting in that hall pushed forward. He arrived at the podium and made a small adjustment to the microphone, and peered above the throngs of onlookers. The applause was calm and courteous as he stared back at him. There was no thunderous applause, absence of electric energy, simply the obligatory clapping of hands. However, the actual moment his arrival wouldn't cause the true shock. It would originate from his opening remarks. The acclaim subsided, leaving a dense silence in its wake. The room itself seemed to be holding its breath. Standing at the podium was Barron Trump. The weight of the moment did not shake his lofty frame. He didn't fidget or change his tie. He didn't nervously look around the crowd, like someone looking for acceptance. He just stood there for a moment. He let the quiet linger. Not hesitantly, but uncontrollably. He took his time filling the void. He had it. And then in a serene, he talked in a calm voice. "I am aware of your expectations of me. And you're incorrect. It was a declaration, not a query. And it struck the room as if it were a punch to the stomach." A confused murmur swept over the audience. Too quiet to disturb the moment, but sufficient to be noticeable. No one had anticipated this type of opening. No contrived charm, no politeness. A void making the audience feel more at ease. He gave it a straight challenge and allowed it to linger for a moment. His eyes darted over the throng. A few leaned forward. Others made reporters tense, who was ready to write down yet another forgettable. Suddenly, political speech discovered their fingers stuck to their keyboards, and he carried on for years after that. "Although I've been seen, I've not heard. And perhaps that was advantageous. I had time to pay attention, to hear opinions regarding my family concerning me, and the reality is, the majority of you have already decided how you feel about me, without having any knowledge at all." The ensuing quiet wasn't merely listening. It was being processed because everyone in that room agreed with him. Everyone is watching from home, had made up his mind about himself. They had relied on headlines to develop their opinions, presumptions, and the significance of his surname. He was placed in a box prior to his uttering a single word, and he was now making them face that. But here's the thing. If you assume someone's identity for too long, you fail to see the reality. There was a noticeable tension in the room. This was more than just a speech. This was not a fleeting moment. This was not what I was expecting. Barron wasn't entertaining the audience or performing. He wasn't attempting to mimic his dad. He wasn't deliberately fleeing from him either. It was so potent because he was merely speaking. In the rear of the room, someplace a reporter put down his pen carefully. A few audience members glanced at one another. Political analysts, even the most doubtful, leaned in, a bit nearer. Since something was taking place here, anything genuine and his subsequent remarks would completely alter the conversation. There was no break for applause from Barron Trump. He wasn't seeking approval. He no longer had them due to his name, not due to the spectacle. However, due to what he was saying wasn't what everybody had anticipated. He let out a deep exhale, adjusting his weight a little before going on. This nation is worn out. Everyone wants to be heard, and everyone is upset. But nobody is interested in listening. A pause of one beat I've spent my whole life watching as individuals shout over one another. Politicians disparage one another, as if it were a game. The media suggests the next person to despise. Families cease communicating with one another. Due to the candidates they supported, he allowed his remarks to calm the room, was absorbing, not merely listening. And I continue to question what the purpose of it is. The question that no one ever asked aloud was, everyone believes they are the protagonist, that these are the correct ones, that all the answers are on their side. However, what occurs when both parties think that? What occurs when no one is prepared to acknowledge that perhaps the opposing viewpoint is also valid? It was the crowd's first reaction, not noisy, not obtrusive. However, some people nodded subtly. A couple of arms crossed across their chests. Others sat motionless, their faces unreadable. However, they weren't ignoring him. I'm not here to provide you with the ideal answer. Although I don't have one, I'm aware of this. It is not necessary to divide in order to move forward. It's via awkward dialogues, by being willing to listen to those with whom you disagree. He turned to look at the front row, an array of seasoned politicians who had devoted decades to transforming every dispute into a conflict. How many people are there in this room, having truly had a change of heart on something significant since you paid attention? A few uncomfortable seat changes and a ripple of movement. That's when people realized this was not a speech for a campaign. This performance was not thoroughly practiced, created to appeal to political talking points. This was different. Afterward, he stated something that totally took everyone by surprise. Barron left his final remarks unspoken. He sensed the weight of the quiet, the change in the atmosphere. Not only were people paying attention, they were in the process of processing. However, he wasn't done. He casually placed his hands on the podium, fingers touching the edge without twitching nervously. However, he managed to take a deep breath, ensuring that his subsequent remarks weren't hurried. People don't understand stuff about maturing in my role. The crowd leaned in subtly yet visibly. Most of you believe that I grew up in a privileged world, that everything was given to me, and I'll be honest, I've never been concerned concerning the source of my next meal. You know what I've had to worry about, though? One more pause. Being assessed before I've even spoken, being diminished to a surname being identified before I had a chance to make my own decision. Curiosity was no longer the only source of tension in the room. It was uncomfortable, because regardless of their desire to acknowledge it, he was correct. For years, the media has speculated about him, never getting a response from him. He had been the focus of innumerable theories. People debated his future in essays and jokes, his loyalty and intelligence, his value, without ever requesting it. Strangers have told me what I think. There have been those who have never met me. Call me anything from a mere affluent child to my father's puppet. And you know what's funny? He looked around the room, falling on the back reporters. None of those folks ever asked me directly. I believe some journalists looked at each other. Some people repositioned their mics. Others shifted uneasily and scrawled notes frantically, being aware that this was becoming something they hadn't anticipated to cover today. It helped me come to a realization. Barron sat up a little. His tone was forceful but calm. If individuals were so certain they knew who I was without ever communicating with me, so how frequently do we treat each other like that? It wasn't only silence in the room. That wasn't just about him. Therefore, It concerned every politician present in the room had carried out the same action. To their rivals, all journalists have created headlines that used black and white to depict humans. Each and every voter had formed a hasty decision about someone only by looking at their name. One phrase taken out of context by a party. He gave them a moment to sit with that. We put individuals in boxes so quickly, swiftly determining who is nice and who is bad, based on a tweet's headline. A rumor. But make sure to tell me, how recently? You had a change of heart about someone. After listening to them, that's when the first significant change occurred. Engagement wasn't all that existed anymore. Introspection was taking place toward the rear of the room. An experienced journalist who had spent many years reporting some of politics' most divisive personalities put down his pen slowly. He had provided speech coverage. From all of the key political figures during the previous 30 years, he had witnessed the rise and fall of presidents. However, he had never witnessed this. This was a mirror, not a speech. This is the first time in a long time that words weren't all that people were hearing. They were recognizing themselves. Then from a location close to the front row, an older man wearing a navy jacket was the only one to stand up. Probably an insider in politics began clapping, but slowly at first. Nor over the top, nor dramatic, just real, then another, then another. And abruptly, the room rolled across like a wave. People were getting up more and more, not as a result of being prodded, not because the cameras were rolling, but the sound grew because they sensed it. Occupying the entire convention hall. However, some attendees welcomed the moment. Others were really unhappy, and the reaction started at that point. Not everyone gave the applause. Indeed. The conference hall echoed with a standing ovation. Indeed. Some were clearly moved by what Barron Trump said. However, not everyone applauded. A few political leaders were still sitting. They folded their arms. Their faces were frozen in unwavering suspicion. A few muttered to one another. Others hardly hid their frustration. Behind a renowned political strategist for a major party, shrugged and muttered. People are in such need of something new. They won't hesitate to devour this. A senator leaned in the direction of a colleague. He's just another Trump. This is just optics. People will be able to recognize it. But in the middle of the space, people weren't only cheering. There was a change in the atmosphere. They were processing a 50-year-old woman who declared outright that they would never hear another Trump speech, discovered herself standing alongside the throng, clapping hands before she even became aware of what she was doing. A younger political analyst who had arrived for a practice performance was no longer so certain. And then the actual storm started. Short videos of the speech quickly went viral on social media. Political figures with varying degrees of influence hurried to provide their opinion. This is the kind of leadership our nation needs. Nothing more than a well-packaged publicity stunt. I never imagined saying this. But don't be duped. That was impressive. This is computed. Hashtags were popular right away. Trump speech by Barron PR. Move or future leader, unity or deceit. A few clips displayed the roaring cheers, portraying Barron as a future leader, who had enthralled the nation with his candor. Others focused on the people who were still seated, asserting that it demonstrated that not everyone was persuaded. However, the media was where the true conflagration was taking place. Cable news networks rushed to steer the conversation. A group of commentators on one network debated if Barron had recently changed the political scene. This was a moment, not a speech. He's fresh and young. People are paying attention like they haven't in a long time. I promise that this will be repeated in upcoming campaigns. However, the skeptics attacked it on another network. Come on, this was thoughtfully made. He said nothing sincere. He's attempting to use the card of togetherness. He's still a Trump, though. Observe how he steered clear of details. Here's how to create a moment, without making any commitments. Then the conspiracy theories surfaced. Others asserted that Barron did not script the entire affair, but through a group of strategists preparing his first political appearance. Others claimed that he was being exploited, a piece of a larger game playing the role of his father's supporters. Then the wild ones came next. All of this is a diversion. What else is going on at the moment? that they would like you not to see. Observe how they utilize this to prepare for 2028. He is simply more adept at concealing it. He is not different. The gap was glaring for everyone who gave him praise. Another ripped him to pieces, for each video demonstrating a standing ovation. Another concentrated on the crowd's expressionless faces. And then the most surprising response of all, it came from an unexpected source. While the media frenzy raged, every moment of Barron Trump's address was scrutinized. Every motion, every pause, each response in the space he was hailed by some as a welcome change. Others referred to him as merely another outcome of political theatrics. However, someone spoke up out of the blue, and everything altered as a result. At a Los Angeles speaking engagement, Michelle Obama addressed a group of young people. College students responding to inquiries about leadership resilience in the nation's situation. Barron Trump had nothing to do with it. Until a reporter in the audience decided to take a chance. Obama's Mrs. How do you feel about the speech that Barron Trump gave? The room went still. The reporter's voice resonated. It would have been simple to ignore the query. Public leaders and politicians constantly deflect. She could have dismissed it with a laugh, avoided or went on, but she didn't. Michelle inhaled deeply, nodding a little as though carefully weighing what she said. I may disagree with his father on a number of issues, you know. She spoke calmly but firmly at first. However, I respect when youth take a stand and advocate for themselves. His remarks regarding listening about avoiding assuming that might teach us all something. The room responded immediately. Some gasped, while others clapped. Some exchanged wide-eyed glances. The comments spread like wildfire. News outlets quickly ran with it. Barron Trump is praised by Michelle Obama. Michelle Obama. Barron Trump has something to teach us all. Unexpected assistance. Barron's speech and the former First Lady's response. The responses came quickly, and not all of them were favorable. Wow. From the right, Michelle Obama is aware of the reality. Perhaps Barron is not like the left. She doesn't owe the Trumps anything, so what is she doing? From those who believe in conspiracies, this was prearranged. Don't be fooled. Even those who thought highly of Michelle Obama argued and struggled with it. She had provided the Trump family with a present they weren't worthy of. Others viewed it as a unique instance of political earnestness. But regardless of the goal, the fire was fueled by it. The Barron's speech was more than a fleeting moment. The following 48 hours were a cultural event. Alongside Barron Trump's name, Michelle Obama's political analysts rushed to make sense of what she said. Was this an indication that people are in dire need of unification? Did she just provide credibility? To the Trump dynasty's future generation, does this have any significance, or are individuals exaggerating? Late-night hosts made fun of the circumstance. Making mockery of both sides, Barron Trump is praised by Michelle Obama. It's similar to learning that your grandmother enjoys rap music. Some people took it seriously. One host of a chat program stared directly into the camera and stated Michelle Obama's ability to recognize that a young man who has every cause to be disliked by her made a valid point. Why aren't we able to do the same in our daily lives? And the topic of conversation briefly changed. People were discussing more than simply whether Barron's was the speech prepared or genuine. They were debating more than simply his last name. They wanted to know if she could listen. Why can't we? Even though some people found the notion appealing, others stepped up their efforts. Barron Trump was once an unproven candidate, to the forefront of a national discussion, and as the pressure increased, the most important question remained. What was his next course of action? Barron Trump did not prepare for this particular speech. It was just meant to be that. A time to speak for himself at last. To refute the presumptions for years, people had been talking about him. However, he was suddenly everywhere. The speech wasn't only widely shared, it was now considered a cultural occasion. Late-night hosts and political commentators, YouTube analysts and influential people on social media, all had something to say. All major networks aired one-hour specials, analyzing what he said, his delivery and future prospects. A panel discussed his unexpected impact on one network. This was more than a speech. This was an admission that he is young. People are paying attention to him since he's new. Unlike other political figures, they have I promise that this will be used in upcoming campaigns. Meanwhile, he was torn apart by another network. He is experimenting with a career in politics. All of this is computed. Observe how he refrained from adopting a firm position on anything. People's desire for a good Trump is so great. Anyone who sounds sensible will be clung to by them. In living rooms, America's bars and college campuses, at a Phoenix coffee shop, customers got into a fight. Two friends in Arizona almost got into a fight. What his last name is doesn't matter to me. He made a point regarding his remarks. Nothing at all. He made just the right statement. All of us are too busy yelling at one another to genuinely correct anything. You genuinely believe he's different, but he's still a Trump. The argument was widely discussed on social media. This child completely altered everything. You people are so naive that he said nothing, if nothing else. This was a masterclass in communications control. Republican strategists at political events, concerns about the long-term effects, he might be the one to genuinely revive moderates. In the meanwhile, Democratic leaders rush to uncertain about how to react if he continues in this manner. In a few years, he becomes a problem. The right and the left were abruptly brought together by a common belief. Barron Trump was no longer just a name. The polls then fell. Quick surveys were conducted by large research firms. Is your opinion of Barron Trump positive? Prior to the speech, 24% were in favor, 26% neutral, and 50% negative. 51% of people liked the speech when it was finished, 30% negative, and 19% neutral. In the event of a future election, would you back Barron Trump? 12% said yes prior to the speech, 33% unsure, 65% no. 37% said yes after the speech. 22% unsure. 41%. No, the political world froze at that point. Those who had disregarded him for years as merely another affluent child with a well-known last name were thinking twice. Those who had dismissed him were suddenly paying attention. And both sides were aware that the people desired more. Journalists attempting to obtain a follow-up response from Barron. Are you planning to give another speech? Do you intend to pursue a career in politics? How did your dad feel about your speech? However, Barron remained silent. No interviews or news releases, silence with no follow-up comments, and in some way, that merely increased people's obsession. When consumers are unable to receive a response, they make their own. Some people believed he was creating the foundation for something more significant. Others thought he had finished his statement. However, one thing was for sure. This was more than simply a passing fad. History was being made.